There will never be peace in Europe while Putin is in the Kremlin. So we have to be strong. We have to be prepared for the worst case, and we have to face him down.
Putin's nuclear threats have jolted the world into action. Joe Biden, Liz Truss, and President Zelensky of Ukraine all spoke out against Russia at the United Nations. This was Zelensky.
Ukraine wants peace. Europe wants peace. The world wants peace. And we have seen who is the only one who wants war. There is only one entity among all UN member states who would say now, if he could interrupt my speech, that he's happy with this war, with his war.
One of our guides throughout the war has been General Sir Richard Sheriff. He was NATO's Deputy Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. He once warned us that this conflict would be as bad as World War II. We could all remember he actually came on this programme on the day, 24th of February, when it happened, and we can remember his chilling words then. Richard joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve.
How dangerous a moment is this when you saw what Putin was saying? You've mentioned this sort of the threat of World War III. Where do you gauge the current situation post Putin's remarks?
It doesn't change the price of fish. This has been as dangerous a moment, a dangerous a time as Europe has seen since the end of the Second World War. But the bottom line, and you said it in your opening remarks, this is bluff. This is the mark of a desperate man. He's looking to reinforce failure. He's scrabbling around, desperate to try and stem the chaotic retreat of Russian forces recently in Ukraine. But the bottom line as well with Putin is, remember, he only respects strength, as is the traditional thing with Russia, and we have got to remain strong. So what the Prime Minister said in New York is absolutely right. And also, of course, I completely second what President Zelensky said. There will never be peace in Europe while Putin is in the Kremlin. So we have to be strong. We have to be prepared for the worst case, and we have to face him down.
And does that mean driving him out of Ukraine, and ultimately, therefore, that would drive him out of power in Russia? Is that the end game? That the best case scenario, perhaps?
What happens in Russia is for the Russians to decide. But yes, absolutely, the end state, as far as this war is concerned, must be victory for Ukraine, defeat for Russia, and victory for Ukraine means Ukraine regains all Ukraine's sovereign territory, and that is going to require the West and NATO to double down on military support, to support the Ukrainians, to reinforce the success that they've recently enjoyed.
How worried are you about this game he's playing with the referendums in areas like Lugansk and Donetsk, where effectively he'll fix the referendum, he'll say this is now Russian soil. No one will buy that in the international community, but he'll say that. Is there a concern then that Ukraine uses Western weapons to fire into those regions and is so therefore attacking Russian soil in Russia's eyes? Does that change the equation in any way?
It increases risks, but as I've said again and again, the way to manage the risks is not to be faced down by them, but to be prepared to face up to them. And that means being prepared for the worst case, which is war with Russia. This means deterring Russia. And this is, we're not, clearly the West is not, NATO is not going to attack Russia's sovereign territory. It's up to the Ukrainians to fight the war the way they want to fight it, with Western support. But we in the West, we in NATO, must ramp up our capability and be prepared for the worst case.
And if that worst case is a nuclear strike in Ukraine, is that effectively a moment where war would have to come? You would get World War III because the West couldn't tolerate that strike. Even though it's not on a NATO country, that would be a game-changing moment and we would have war with Russia.
The NATO line will not change, that NATO will only go to war if it is attacked. So, that remains off the scale. However, the risk remains of escalation and nuclear escalation. We should not be complacent about that, although I think fundamentally it is bluff. But the way to, as I say, the way to manage that risk is to be ready with a very, very powerful, strong NATO deterrent.
But that's an interesting point there, because if the nuclear strike were to happen, and let's say, we don't imagine it will, but it's not impossible. We couldn't rule it out entirely, could we? If that were to happen in Ukraine and NATO's position remains, well, it didn't happen on a NATO country, so we're going to do nothing, then there isn't a deterrent there, really, for Putin in that area, is there?
Well, it clearly what happens in such an eventuality could easily change the equation completely. But the fundamental fact remains that NATO is a defensive alliance, but is committed to supporting Ukraine do what needs to be done, and therefore will continue to give, or should continue to give, Ukraine to do the tools to do the job.
You said that the ultimate deterrent is war with Russia. Is there appetite? Do we have the stomach for that, do you feel?
Well, the ultimate threat is war with Russia, but we have to recognize that we live in exceptionally dangerous times and should be prepared for the worst case. Anything else would be foolhardy.
And are we prepared for the worst? I guess the question that follows: do you think in Whitehall we're prepared for that? In NATO we're prepared for that? Has that been war gamed? Has that been conceived of? Do you think that is an unfortunate and completely unwanted end game, but it's there to be prepared for?
The simple answer to that is no, we're not ready. Being ready for war means rebuilding military capabilities which have been effectively thrown away during the years of disarmament in the West and in European countries, including Britain. It means building up stocks of ammunition, of weapons, of missiles. It means ramping up our military capability, and this is going to require significant defense spending to do that. And it's not going to be achieved overnight. But this is very much a sort of come-as-you-are party. We should start where we are and do what we can to build up capability. But it needs a fundamental mindset shift, not only in this country, but also across the 30 member states of NATO as well.
So it's a really interesting point to see whether that mind shift will happen. General Sir Richard Sheriff, thank you for joining us as ever.
Thank you very much.
He is NATO's Deputy Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, and you can tell from his voice and what he's saying that this is clearly a moment of deep concern and crisis with what Putin is planning.